Daniel Reed trusted Elena Reed with everything until Captain Marcus Hale turned routine layovers into a deadly secret that shattered their perfect life. Captain Daniel Reed had built his life around discipline, precision, and routine. As a senior airline pilot, he was trusted with long-haul international flights that demanded focus and emotional control. His reputation in the cockpit was spotless, and his colleagues saw him as reliable under pressure. Outside the cockpit, he lived a quiet life with his wife, Dr. Elena Reed, a highly skilled surgeon at a major city hospital. She was known for her steady hands in critical operations and her ability to remain calm in life-or-death situations. Together, they appear to represent stability and success, a couple admired by both aviation and medical circles. Their home was comfortable but rarely filled with shared time. Their schedules often kept them apart for days or even weeks. Daniel would return from flights exhausted, while Elena would leave early for emergency cases or overnight shifts. Despite this distance, they maintained a routine of brief messages and occasional dinners when their paths crossed. Friends saw them as a strong couple who understood the demands of high-pressure careers. However, beneath this structure was a growing silence. Conversations became shorter over time, replaced by updates about work rather than personal feelings. Daniel began to notice Elena's increasing focus on her phone during rare shared moments. She often mentioned conferences in different cities, but details were vague. Still, Daniel trusted her completely, believing their bond was strong enough to survive distance and time. He never imagined that the gaps in their routine were the beginning of something far more complex and dangerous, slowly forming just beyond his awareness. At first, the changes in Elena Reed's routine seemed minor and easy to ignore. Daniel told himself that hospital work was unpredictable and that surgeons often face sudden schedule shifts. Still, certain details began to stand out. Elena started leaving home earlier than usual, sometimes without explaining why her shift had changed. She also returned from work trips with small inconsistencies in her luggage tags, showing cities that did not match her stated conference locations. Daniel noticed, but chose not to confront her, convincing himself there was a reasonable explanation. Over the following months, these inconsistencies increased. Elena's medical conferences began aligning suspiciously with international flight routes Daniel recognized from his own airline schedule. At the same time, Daniel became aware of Captain Marcus Hale, another experienced pilot in the airline system. Marcus had a strong reputation and often flew long-haul routes similar to Daniel's. What caught attention was how frequently Marcus was assigned to destinations where Elena claimed to be attending professional events. Daniel quietly began observing patterns rather than reacting emotionally. He reviewed his own flight logs and casually compared them with Elena's travel periods. He also noted how Marcus's layovers often matched the exact cities and dates of Elena's absences. The overlaps were too frequent to dismiss as coincidence, yet still not enough to form a clear accusation. Despite this, Daniel felt an unfamiliar unease growing inside him. His trust remained intact on the surface, but internally he began questioning the structure of Elena's explanations. The life he once saw as perfectly aligned started to feel slightly off balance, as if small cracks were forming in something he had always believed was unbreakable. Daniel Reed could no longer ignore the pattern forming in front of him. What began as scattered doubts turned into a structured investigation he carried out in silence. He used his access to airline scheduling systems to review historical flight logs, layover records, and crew assignments. On the surface, everything followed standard operational procedures, but beneath it, repeated coincidences began to stand out with uncomfortable clarity. Elena Reed's travel dates matched too closely with Captain Marcus Hale's international rotations. Whenever Elena was listed as attending a medical conference abroad, Marcus was often scheduled on a flight arriving in the same city within hours. Daniel expanded his search further, comparing hotel bookings linked to crew layovers. Several results showed both names appearing in the same hotels during overlapping time windows, even though they were officially registered for different purposes. The more Daniel examined the data, the more intentional the pattern appeared. These were not random overlaps or scheduling errors. They formed a consistent trail across multiple countries and time zones. Each discovery weakened his confidence in the life he thought he understood. Yet he continued in silence, driven by a need for certainty rather than confrontation. Outside his investigation, Daniel maintained his normal duties as a pilot, completing flights with the same discipline he was known for. However, internally, his focus was shifting entirely toward the hidden connection between Elena and Marcus. The trust he once carried without question was now replaced by a growing fixation on proving what the data seemed to already suggest. Daniel Reed moved beyond airline records and began focusing on indirect signs that could confirm what he feared. He reviewed shared hotel booking systems, travel reimbursements, and corporate expense claims connected to layovers and conferences. What he discovered pointed toward a parallel pattern of secrecy. Some hotel stays were recorded under corporate group bookings, but certain names appeared repeatedly in proximity without official explanation. Elena Reed's financial records showed small, uncharacteristic expenses that did not match hospital activity or conference-related costs. These transactions were subtle enough to avoid attention, but when placed alongside Marcus Hale's travel patterns, they suggested coordinated timing. Daniel also noticed that Elena had begun using a secondary phone line, one that did not appear in their shared household records. The connection between Elena and Marcus gradually became clearer. Their communication seemed to be maintained through private channels that left minimal trace in standard systems. The pattern suggested long-term planning rather than a brief or accidental relationship. Their meetings were not random encounters during travel, but carefully aligned layovers arranged across international routes. Daniel's emotional state shifted as confirmation replaced suspicion. He no longer searched for possibility. He was now documenting certainty. The sense of betrayal deepened with every new detail, not because of sudden discovery, but because of how long it had been hidden in plain sight. Despite the internal collapse he was experiencing, Daniel continued to function in his professional role. However, his attention outside the cockpit was fully consumed by the growing realization that Elena and Marcus had built an entirely separate reality within the structure of their demanding careers, one that existed parallel to his own life without detection for months. As the truth settled in, Daniel Reed entered a period of quiet emotional pressure that he could not share with anyone. He continued flying long-haul routes, maintaining his professional discipline, but his mental state became increasingly strained. Every flight departure and landing felt routine on the surface, yet his thoughts were constantly divided between cockpit responsibilities and the growing reality he had uncovered. He stopped discussing personal matters with colleagues and withdrew from casual conversations, focusing entirely on work performance and private analysis of Elena's movements. At home, Elena Reed noticed the change in his behavior. Daniel's responses became shorter, his presence more distant, and his attention less engaged during their rare shared time. Elena, however, did not address the shift directly. Instead, she maintained her usual routine, continuing her hospital duties and scheduled travel without visible disruption. Her calm exterior gave no indication of the hidden life Daniel had discovered through records and patterns. Captain Marcus Hale remained active on international routes, unaware that his movements were now being tracked mentally by Daniel with precision. Each assigned flight, each layover destination, and each overlapping schedule added another layer to Daniel's internal pressure. The three lives continued in parallel, but the invisible connection between them had already changed its nature from coincidence to certainty. The emotional tension built slowly and silently, without confrontation or resolution. Daniel found himself trapped between professional obligation and personal collapse, unable to act openly while carrying knowledge that redefined everything he believed about his marriage. The structure of his life remained intact externally, but internally it was beginning to fracture under the weight of sustained betrayal. The situation reached its breaking point during a scheduled international layover in a coastal city known for busy airport traffic and luxury transit hotels. Daniel Reed had been assigned a long-haul flight that placed him in the same destination window as Elena Reed's medical conference schedule. At the same time, Captain Marcus Hale was also routed through the same hub for a separate crew rotation. For the first time, all three were in the same city under overlapping timelines that could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. Daniel did not act immediately upon arrival. Instead, he observed quietly, confirming hotel check-ins and tracking movement patterns through available crew logistics systems. Elena arrived earlier in the day under the official cover of her conference registration. Marcus checked in later that evening as part of his flight layover protocol. The hotel staff recorded nothing unusual, but Daniel noted the timing of their arrivals with growing certainty. Security footage later reviewed by investigators showed Elena and Marcus entering and exiting different areas of the hotel across several hours, often within short intervals of each other. Their movements suggested coordination designed to avoid detection rather than chance encounters. Daniel remained distant but alert, staying in a separate section of the hotel while monitoring developments internally. As night progressed, tension escalated in ways that were not visible to outsiders. A series of private interactions occurred away from public spaces, leading to increased agitation and instability in the pattern of movements captured on surveillance. Eventually, hotel security was alerted after an emergency signal was triggered from one of the upper floor rooms, marking the moment when the hidden situation finally broke beyond control and could no longer remain concealed. After the emergency response, authorities arrived quickly and secured the hotel area, sealing off the upper floors and collecting all available evidence. The scene revealed a situation that confirmed a fatal outcome connected to the concealed relationship between Elena Reed, Daniel Reed, and Captain Marcus Hale. Emergency personnel attempted intervention, but the situation had already reached its irreversible conclusion before help could change the outcome. Investigators began reconstructing the timeline using surveillance footage, electronic records, and staff statements. The evidence showed a gradual buildup of tension throughout the layover period, marked by multiple private encounters and movements across different sections of the hotel. What appeared on the surface as routine travel assignments was now understood as a carefully aligned series of events that brought three lives into a single breaking point. Elena's medical conference records, Marcus's flight logs, and Daniel's airline schedule were all examined in detail. The overlapping patterns that Daniel had once traced privately were now part of a formal investigation. Authorities confirmed that the relationship between Elena and Marcus had been ongoing for an extended period, maintained through international travel routes and concealed communications. The airline and hospital institutions involved launched internal reviews, distancing themselves publicly while cooperating with investigators. Public attention grew rapidly as details of the case spread, focusing on how three respected professionals had become entangled in a hidden emotional structure that ended in tragedy. In the aftermath, Daniel's life was re-examined through reports and testimonies, revealing how prolonged secrecy and emotional pressure had led to a collapse that no one outside the situation had detected in time. The final outcome left behind a record of professional success overshadowed by personal devastation and irreversible consequences.